All right. Hello. My name's Ian Bawtinheimer, and my capstone this year is titled Causeway. I really started this year being interested in learning more about the craftspeople, the artists, and the designers out of my home province of British Columbia. It was something I really knew nothing about. So I began with case study research to understand some of the people, their work, and the qualities that both them and their work possessed. So just a little bit into that from left to right here, and with their work underneath them, we have BC Binning, who is a artist and professor out of Vancouver. He used witty, abstracted line drawings inspired by his surrounding landscapes and nautical elements from his passion of sailing with his wife. Um, his work was kind of elementary and humorous and welcoming and featured these pops of primary color. He was immensely influential on the craft scene in BC and really was a driving force behind pushing craft to be at the perceived level of beauty that art was at the time. Here we have Molly Lamb Boback, who was a teacher, writer, printmaker, and painter. She was the first official female artist of the war. And it was kind of her cartoon diary entries that she did every day, and formatted to look like a newspaper, and covering her take on the war. It was very political and honest and clever and raw. Here we have Axel Ebring, who's a Swedish potter. He set up in Notch Hill and then later in Vernon. He really believed that it was the place where the object was made that made it so important, so much so that that was how he signed and cataloged all of his ceramics. He really exemplified the kind of attitudes and work ethics of those of the interior by trying his hand at farming and mining before turning to pottery, where he ended up digging his own clay, creating his own wares and markets outside of train stations, and wood firing all of his clay himself. Next on the right there is Fred Herzog, who was born in Germany, raised in Vancouver. He was a street photographer that really pushed the use of color photography in an era that was predominantly black and white. He shot from the hip and took just real photos of real people in real time. He called Vancouver engagingly seedy and colorful and photographed the downtown east side that was occupied by the working class. He understood that the working class had a real grit and honesty about them that you could not find in the clean upper scale neighborhoods. So these photographs or these artists and their work really just kind of like was a starting block for me to kind of attempt to understand more about the artists and designers themselves, but also the qualities that their work possessed. They really all used a off-kilter approach and put emphasis on location. They featured personalities that summed up the attitudes and outlooks of many British Columbians. So Causeway came about from the combined thoughts on how to both pay homage to BC through the craft, personalities, and landscapes, as well as my own personal reflection on what brought me from Victoria to Oakville, Ontario to be in this program. My parents are very active and many of their hobbies revolved around being outdoors, and that was a really big part in how I was raised. When I was in my mid-teens and started working, I gravitated towards jobs that were outside and hands-on. And it was also about this time that I started moving towards more creative social circles. And a really pivotal moment in my life was working at the Causeway Marina in downtown Victoria. It was a job filled with oddball obsessive sailors and day drinking yacht dads, and it was a job that really taught me problem solving and materials, and really ultimately what got me interested in the idea of how things work. So Causeway is a furniture collection that uses nautical references to pay homage to BC and celebrate a job that showed me the joys of these qualities that so heavily overlap with those of furniture design. So the nautical language that I chose to incorporate in these objects are the mast, a tall vertical pole that supports the sail. Oops. The lines, which are steel wire or natural fiber rope that run up and down sailing vessels and are used to help rig up the sails and moor the boat to the docks. The anchor, which is a heavy object attached to the vessel by a cable, rope, or chain and dropped into the water to keep the ship in place by its weight or its flukes, which grip the bottom. The lumberyard skiff, which is a type of boat. It's a flat-bottomed work boat. They're very inexpensive and simple in their construction. And I think, yeah, there's one on the bottom there. And that really influenced the kind of simplicity and function-driven forms of Causeway. General boat detailing, just really looking into the soft curves and shaping of the hull and in the exterior to allow for the boat to be glide through water easily, as well as be aerodynamic and efficient. I looked into the sail and the seat, which are the textile material choices that I'll get into when we get into the objects. And finally, looking at construction materials using Douglas fir in both the pieces, which is heavily associated with the temperate forests of BC and is a common boat building material due to its high strength to weight ratio. So the first object we have here, this was supposed to be a 2-page spread and it's not. I'll leave it on the photo because it's nicer. I can read that. So the light here, which features a large vertical dowel that houses an LED strip and holds up the diffuser. The secondary mast next to it is also holding up that diffuser. The anchor on the piece is the base, which is weighted with a 2.5-pound plate. So a literal anchor in this sense. The lumberyard skiff, so the subtle shaping on the ends of the dowels and the taper of the anchor really got their kind of form through that trapezoid shaped stern of the lumberyard skiff. The sail, so it's a Dacron sailcloth for a diffuser, which is the material actually used for sails. I'll skip over technical drawings. It's not that important. And just getting into a bit about how it was made. So the joinery was all done on the drill press, and there's a hole from the bottom of the mast to where the light source starts to hide the wires. The light strip sits flush to the wood in a stopped groove, and all the pieces were turned on the router table. I flip cut the base on the CNC to dish out the underside for the driver and the weighted plate, as well as create that taper on the top side. The diffuser is held in place by tenons that come out of that dowel and are then capped on the outside, which allows you to remove them and remove the sail, the Dacron sailcloth if needed to be cleaned, shipped, or changed. And next, we have the sailor's chair. So the masts here are seen in the 2 back legs that mimic the positioning of those in the light. The lines are the thin rails connecting the front and back legs. The anchor, again, to tie in with the light, as well as to counter the potential tippiness of the heavily tapered footprint. And the lumberyard skiff, again, just referenced with the subtle shaping of the dowel ends, that little 10-degree into a flat, as well as those angles on the anchor. Getting into just kind of like general boat craftsmanship, so the contrasting, like, durable where needed and delicate where allowed, with the contrasting sizes of some of these elements, as well as just the soft, subtle curves of the seat and some of the edge treatments there. Again, a technical drawing, which I will pass over. And then just a bit about the making process. So again, just like with that simplicity of the lumberyard skiff construction, using the drill press and the table saw for all the joinery here. The seat is veneer on plywood with solid edging, wedged through tenon joinery on the front legs into the seat. And the upholstery being done with layers of plywood, foam, cotton batting, and then finally the actual cotton canvas, which the choice in that references like the typical cleanliness associated with boats, as well as the typical colorways. And that is my presentation. I'll now open the floor to any questions, comments, or critiques. Thank you. I had some drawings and models that I opened the wrong presentation here. But I included some of those because for those who is here in the winter semester critique, the objects have changed a lot over the past year, really. As I guess just attempted to narrow down this very broad concept of paying homage to a province filled with immigrants and how you really kind of make that happen. So these really came about after the winter semester.
Ian, I really like your continued use of these nautical references, just describing the parts of your furniture as mast and sail in that way. So it makes it really clear what your intention is, and the idea of those three elemental things: the anchor, the mast, the sail, I think are pretty obvious in what you're trying to achieve here. It's sometimes following a formula may lead you to more unexpected aesthetic decisions than just following the pure sort of feedback loop that might occur in a design process. So you're trying to continue to follow a conceptual process that may lead you away from maybe more appropriate design decisions for the functionality of a chair, for example. I mean, keeping that vertical back means you can't have something particularly ergonomic unless you've got that sloped cushion, which you put on there. What do you think, Lucas?
Thank you. I like it.
Nice.
So in your presentation, I think the respect that you're according to previous generations of artists and makers, people like BC Binning, clearly there's I think there's more of a connection visually to these pieces to BC Binning than perhaps to the nautical references that you had, just in terms of the stylistic approach to drawing, because these feel very much to me like physical sketches. I really appreciate the care and consideration you put into the lamp in terms of the mast and the diffusion, and the fact that you can turn it around and you're not getting blinded by that light. Like the diffuser acts as a diffuser as well as a kind of concentrator of light. I'm not 100% sure about all of the decisions in the chair, but clearly there are languages that you're trying to connect the two together. And you need that kind of anchor at the back just to really make it a more stable chair. But I think somehow having like, a round language, or, there might be easier than that kind of hard cornered block at the back. And again, I appreciate the use of Douglas fir because it does have that relationship to boat building and the environment.
For sure. Thank you.
But I liked your statement, and I hope this is your statement, and if it's not, I want to hear who said it. Durable when needed, delicate when allowed.
Oh, that was me.
Okay,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
respect for that.
Thank you.
So I will be quoting Ian Bawtinheimer anytime I use that. 'Cause
Nice.
I think it is emblematic of kind of the way you approach things.
Mhm.
I think the lamp is really lyrical and effective, and I just really, and I like the way you resolved the chair. Looks great from the back. I'm just not too sure about not having any stretchers in the front, even just for visual reasons. And
Mhm.
but I see the economy that you're trying to achieve with the lumberyard skiff.
Mhm.
But it almost feels like it's too refined for the lumberyard skiff, and yet not refined enough to be what the lamp is. So
Mhm.
it's a tough one.
Definitely.
That's all I wrote down. I'm sure more is going to come up as
Great.
as we go.
Thank you, Peter.
Just a quick question. I don't know if this was a consideration or not, but did you, I'm trying to remember I know that there was like a moving light or something in this before, or
I wanted it to
am
move.
I remembering that correctly?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was originally going to be a bulb, and I wanted that to be able to like slide up and down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the inlay, and that you used a high quality LED and not those little tiny spots
yeah.
everywhere. It really
Mhm.
creates an elegance to that sail. Was there any other consideration, whoops,
Oh.
to see ya. Like you put a lot of work into hiding the weight. Was there any consideration of just making the weight or the anchor, the design itself as the base, maybe casting that base shape that you have out of an iron or whatever is commonly used as an anchor?
Yeah, I really wanted to I think just keep the kind of consistency with the wood and the lighter textile fabric.
Yeah.
As it stands right now, the weighted plate isn't actually in there because it doesn't quite fit. I got to chisel out a little bit. So it does stand without the weighted plate. So that does kind of act on its own there. But yeah, getting into the metal, I think, would have taken a bit of warmth away from the designs.
Yeah. Because even like, I know a lot of nautical work is a lot of brass involved, and maybe like using that exact shape on both the pieces and making a relief cast or out of brass, like a patinaed brass, could keep that warmth and stay true to your nautical elements, and not have to do the work of recessing weight to hide things, I think would be an interesting experiment as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But overall, I like the progress you made.
Thank you.
It's great. Anybody else?
I just, as you said that, I was just wondering if it's still weighted, but it had a slight curve on the bottom, so it could actually, it would stay vertical, but it would rock
Yeah,
if,
be like a buoy.
and
Yeah.
then you need the shrouds to go slam, slam,
Yeah.
slam, and keep you up all night.
No, that's a very interesting idea.
I mean, it's just gonna come sit in the chair, but I'd
Yeah.
do something to say too.
Now you got to talk about it too.
Yeah, I guess I just want to acknowledge the work that I think I've really seen you put into this project, and especially like the hundreds of models that you made. Yeah, and I think it's a really pleasing realization of your goals, and I think that, I don't know, I'm having a hard time describing it, but they just really remind me of, they really speak of you in some ways. I think maybe part of it is just like the very minimal color palette and the way that you dress in like two colors. But yeah, it's I think it's a really great realization of your goals and of you as a maker.
Thank you. It means a lot.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Ian. You have a collection, and I know that was something that you wanted to make sure these pieces did speak to each other, and they certainly do. And I think the way you honed your language to talk about those elements from the boatyard, let's say, or is a lovely narrative to apply to the objects. One thing I often talk about, and I probably will in some way in my comments to everybody, you know, again, on the seminar side of the class where we're talking about really speaking to your ideas and stuff. Another thing is sometimes just talking about your process, right? That you guys all apply to things. And I haven't mentioned this to anybody before, like earlier today, but you know, I think that's one thing that maybe is important in like learning about yourself. You are very good at like iterative, like design. You really explore a lot of ideas, which I think is really fundamental to being a good designer. Like, you know, you have to really go through, and that's how you learn what is the best idea. But sometimes I worry with you a bit. You don't know when to stop, you know, because like, for example, on the chair, I know you were still playing with the shaping of the chair seat, the panel, the pan, the seat pan, let's call it, right? And I think that there's some really lovely notes in that, but it feels like a completely different idea to me. You know, before it was a little bit more angular, and I think it like matched the footprint. And now I feel like you're kind of exploring a new idea there. Like it's like I see the attempt to tie it in with the round elements. Like I see that because this is actually, I really quite like this, right? Like I like this form here. It's really nice to look at the back, this shape. But then this stands in harsh contrast, right? So like it's just it's so tricky. And that, you know, and to design a collection, like a tight collection, you know, different than what Joel did, because Joel was trying to explore that there was a unified language, but he was trying to explore different things, you know. It's hard, it's really challenging. So you know, I don't know what the solution is. It's a bit of a balance, right? Because you change one thing and then you got to change something else, you know, and then it changes something on the lamp. So I don't know what the solution is there, because I do like that. But I think this draws just attention to this feels different.
For sure.
You know, so how do you reconcile that? And then do you have to do something else there? Maybe. I don't know. The other thing I just wonder, because I think the quality of the light is beautiful. I think it worked really well. Lucas is right. We chose the right fixture in there. You know, I always questioned, you know, the function of this separate mast, and I can just see how it, you know, you had to build, it's like almost building triangulation to support this better. And the Dacron works lovely, but I do wonder, you know, because there's just a little, like it's something you're asking everybody to look at it very perfectly as a column. And I don't know what the solution is if you like, because there's just one area where it's sort of, you know, like, I don't know if this needs to be more rigid. It's lovely that it's not, like, I don't know, you know, just because you want it pulled really taut.
Yeah, so on drilling the holes for this was really tricky because it does have to, I wanted it very tight and taut like that. And lining them up was quite tricky. So on this side, there is just this little bit that could, you know, that hole should have been drilled just a little bit.
It's tricky.
So, and then I ran out of material because I was experimenting with it so much. There's no finish on this, but using marine varnish on it. So it is something I'm gonna do another sale and experiment more with the finish on it. But yeah, that's something I wanted out of it as well, was that tightness, which I don't think it's just slightly off here.
I know, it's just, it's so slight. It's so slight. So I feel bad saying.
There is the place I was looking at, they were so close. It was like a 3.8 and a 4 ounce. So,
you know, it kind of makes you think about sailing things, you know, because when you have a sail, it's pulled tight with sheets like ropes, right? Or then the wind presses into it, and it does make you like, if you're continue to explore this theme, you know, to develop a body of work, if there's other ways that you can pull the form tight in the installation to stretch it, so you don't have to rely on, I don't know, you know, I know that's changing the idea completely. So, but it just, more ideas.
Always more ideas.
Developed a lot of ideas this term, and that's fantastic.
Most of it's been said. The one thing I would say is it's a testament to your work and the projects you made, and that you're able to leave your chair turned backwards to us.
Mhm.
And for a while, your lamp was turned backwards. And for me, you lined up your plugs so that the grain's the same on both sides. Might
Mhm.
sound silly, but it actually is an attention. It shows an attention to detail. But your pieces are resolved and finished, and you've paid attention to them. Did you know that the plugs lined up?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I thought you were sneaking.
No, I was like, what exactly does it look like? But yeah, no, that was intentional.
So it's a nice detail that you also could have considered to carry through potentially in other places.
Mhm.
Just the contrast of that end grain with on the showing on the back leg. But again, because I've said this to everyone so far, this is the first time I've seen the lamp on.
Mhm.
Some people it's been the first time with the blanket off, and the lamp the diffuser works, and the lamp is well resolved, and I'm happy to see that, and I'm also glad, as Lucas has said, that you chose the right LED
Mhm.
for it, because it really does make a world of a difference. And it's impressive that you and Joel and everyone have tried things. You've tried lighting, and you also learned how to sew. I
Mhm.
think. Did you
Yeah.
know how to sew before?
I sewed a pencil case once,
Okay.
like 4 years ago.
Yeah. So you took on
Yeah.
your own upholstery,
Mhm.
which is great. So I give you kudos for that.
Mhm.
No, that's fine. Yep. I mean, there's a lot that's already been said, so I'm not going to repeat it, Ian, but I mean, great work. One of the things that kind of came to my mind as you were presenting here is I forget who the maker was that you referenced, but you mentioned that the place that a piece was made was really important to that maker.
Mhm.
I'm curious in terms of you as a maker making pieces in a place that is not the place that you're referencing in these pieces. Like, do you have any? What was that process like for you?
I think that it was kind of. I think it's something that I've always kind of done, because wherever you're from and like the surroundings that you have growing up, like that really is what makes you who you are. And I think that um while this was a more like conscious effort to kind of pay homage or use like design or visual references to a specific place, or in this case like job that was really influential for me, I think that it's very like internal, because it's, with the nature and nurture debate, it's really, who you're brought up by and where you're brought up, and that makes you you. And so I think that a lot of the stuff I make and will continue to make has inherent kind of West Coast influences, despite how prominent they are or not. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this definitely came about from, you grow up in a really beautiful place, and then you're in Oakville, Ontario, and you're really thankful for the friends you got because you're in Oakville, Ontario. And yeah, it definitely like a lot of, kind of reflecting back on that journey that brought me here. And yeah.
Sure. So on the flip side of that, what of Oakville, Ontario, do you feel is in these pieces? Like, is it
The community,
yeah.
the friendships,
Okay.
the those collaborative kind of efforts and conversations that you have that help build your work up. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This might sound a little silly, but I'm not a sailor. Actually, sailing scares me so much. And the few times I've been forced on a sailboat, my favorite part was when actually the stiffness of the sail I guess it's called lufting when
Mhm.
it starts to, and I felt so relieved that there was no more wind in the sail. Because that meant it was over. So I feel actually very relaxed when I look at this sail, even though it's not as taut as
Yeah.
you want it. I still think it references what a sail does, just like depending on the wind. And so I'm super glad it's not taut, because otherwise I'd be anxious.
I'm
So
glad you're not anxious.
I have a couple things, but I wanted to start by saying I really like the two different bases. I think for me, it's a little bit more like architectural. Like I'm glad you included those, like the street photography photos, because I really get like a scaffolding kind of feeling, or like two different buildings, but they're on the same street kind of thing. And I think if it was like circles everywhere, it would be too, I don't know, too like minimalist maybe. And when you kind of mentioned that like grittiness and like art of downtown East Side Vancouver, like I see that more, that they're kind of mismatchy. I also I just thought about this today when I was looking at it, but I really like the triangular cushion on the bottom and the wedge. I think it has that kind of like looking into something, like an expanse, like the ocean. Yeah, I think that shape works really well for what you were going for.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. So my capstone presentation's name is coming full circle. And to start us off, I'd like to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Andrea Tagaan. I was born and raised in the Philippines. And this is just me in my dad's province in Bohol, Philippines. And yeah, growing up, I had a lot of memories in Bohol, which is my dad's province. And oftentimes we would go and like travel to like really beautiful sceneries. And one of the sceneries that I will greatly cherish is called Chocolate Hills. And I remember every time I would visit there, even though I was just really young, I still remember the memory of like being amazed by the scenery and like just how beautiful it is. Like kind of almost looks like a Toblerone or like Hershey's chocolate kisses, you know? And I have a sweet tooth, so I love chocolate. So just like it just kind of makes sense that this is like the memory that I cherish the most. And for my capstone brief, I basically just want to represent my Filipino culture and my childhood memories through weaving. And here's just like some pictures that inspired me in creating this capstone. And yeah, so moving forward, I researched a lot about the traditional Filipino designs. And one of the design is like pre-colonial. So that's like before the Spaniards took over Philippines. And the other one is when they Spanish colonial. And there's like a lot of different historical periods that's present in Filipino design. And yeah, like one of them is the pre-colonial, Spanish colonial, and like some hints of Art Deco, modernism, and like in the recent years, also Scandinavian and Japanese design. And as I said, like growing up in my dad's province, I was like very much surrounded by like Bahay Kubo furniture. And this is like, whenever I think of Philippines, I think of like bamboo furniture and like wrapped with rattan. And yeah, this just like inspired me to like apply this in my capstone. So a contemporary Filipino designer that I look up to the most is Kenneth Copenpugh. And in most of his works, he would make use of like wood materials and such as like abaca, rattan, bamboo, and his designs continue to push the boundaries of making Philippine furniture using natural fibers. And for weaving, the weaving industry in the Philippines date back to the 13th century, and they use a lot of cotton, abaca fibers, and pineapple fibers from the local farms there. And like when I was like studying in the Philippines, we have this event called field demonstration. It's where we would like dress up in Filipino attire, as you can see over there. That's me. And we would like do traditional dances in those attire. And I feel like it's very suiting for my capstone because I'm like mostly focused on the weaving patterns in the Philippines. So for my explorations, I decided to explore more on weaving. So I did that for my ancillary project. And I did a bunch of like different Filipino patterns. So one is called ikat and pinilian, and I think this is called kusikus. Then abra matamata and hablon dumaguete. And it's actually over there, like my samples are over there if you want to look at it. And yeah, for ideation, initially I wanted to make a woven chair, but because of like how it's very complex and like the weaving part would like take a lot of time, and I tried to resolve the like how to weave on it, but like because I want to emphasize more on the weaving pattern, I figured that like making a simpler structure would be like better. So that's how I came up with stools, like a set of stools. So for my weaving patterns, as I said, I'm greatly inspired by Chocolate Hills. So I made like 3 different patterns inspired by it, and yeah. So for my samples, so for my ancillary, I started with like textile weaving, and transitioning to furniture weaving was very difficult because like how it's very different when you apply textile weaving to furniture. As you can see for my samples over here, like the back is very messy, and oops, sorry. And it wasn't just like nice to see, I guess. So that's why I did a bunch of more samples until I came up with like a sample that's like much neater and pleasing to the eyes. So here's my capstone project called Nesting Stool. It's basically just 3 different woven stools that has different patterns and color palette. And you can actually like nest them together. And here too, in the front as well. And yeah, that's my project. And to end my presentation, I would like to show a weaving process that I did. It's just a short video. So for the weaving, I had a bit of trouble like finding a way to weave on it because like the frame is much different to my samples. So for my first try, the the hooks was exposed, and based on the feedback, people told me to just like hide it, so that's why it's like in the bottom instead. And like here, I'm like wrapping around the rope after I'm done with the pattern to kind of hide the rail. And yeah, that's it. No, it's not done. Yep, go ahead. Oh, oh yeah. So the tiny detail over here that's like wrapped is very last minute, but I feel like it's very appropriate because I'm like inspired by Bahay Kubo furniture, and as you can see in the photos, I'm not okay, never mind. But like the stools are usually wrapped with rattan, and I felt like it was very necessary to add this tiny detail to kind of like justify my concept. Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you now feel confident with your new weaving skills that you could accomplish what you had in your concept drawing?
Yeah.
A full wraparound chair? I
Yeah.
think that's the next step. Feels like it's structurally it's there. I think you should really push yourself to get around it, because you've now gone from your samples to your mock-ups, final size mock-ups, and finished stools. Now you need to go for the goal. And it's very close. You're there. I feel like
Maybe.
this is if it's taking my weight, no problem. Feel design wise, it needs just visually is what we have to work on now. It's just getting it to a more of a show-stopping piece. To put this much work into just a simple bench is almost a shame. I feel like you should just keep pushing this, because you've got the hard part now. You got it down.
Thank you.
Well done.
Got to grab my notes here. So
Thank you.
I loved, oh, sorry, Andrew. I loved your, the images that you showed with the chocolate hills that seem to rise up out of the jungle floor to create a pattern. And then you extrapolated that into a pattern of your own. So I think there's also something really nice about the way the little rattan loops decoratively form something. There's sort of, it's a suggestion of the way the structure could come together. So I think your instincts are really good. I'm a little concerned about how long the cord lengths are as the sort of floating parts of the I guess the weft as you're moving through. And I wonder, did you do a lot of research or experimentation into how traditional Filipino weaving would be incorporated into, say, like outdoor furniture? Or you spoke a little bit about it, but was there something to be learned there for the durability of these pieces?
So my design is like very much different to like Filipino outdoor furniture, because most of it is like woven with abaca fibers and like, you know, like rattan. And so I was just basically doing this using my own technique by just like, you know, experimenting a lot and doing a lot of samples. So yeah.
Yeah, so you're kind of trying to break new ground into a new technique. I guess one of the concerns I have is how much this is flexible here Whereas in the areas where you're more up and down, you have a greater structure. And I wonder if there's some way to have still achieve the pattern you want and not drive yourself crazy with the effort of, going up and down to create that. It's nice seeing the range of different samples you've got there. And I agree with Lucas, like you've done a lot of the hard investigative work to take it into 3 dimensions now with a chair form, I think would be really exciting. But there was something really interesting I thought about the way you've created those. The stacking stools give you an opportunity to have 3 different patterns and 3 different colors, and yet it still all hangs together as one collection of pieces, which allows you to sort of show different possibilities there. So I think the choice when you abandon the chair to go to these 3 pieces made a lot of sense. I also really like the chunkiness of the dowels you've created. They seem overscaled, but so is the pattern. So it's almost like you're making big models, in a way. That doesn't make sense, but somehow the scale of the leg and the scale of the patterning makes sense to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're sort of investigating that part of your heritage and yet taking it somewhere unexpected, I guess.
I have always enjoyed that your project is completely personal, and it comes from a place with a lot of sentiment, and it's very much about you, which is quite lovely. And I feel like to some of the points that Lucas and Peter have raised, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You're just kind of really getting into the possibility of what this could open up for furniture design. When I look at the 3, the largest is probably the most successful because the pattern to me really, you don't have to know the chocolate hills, but if you do know them, you see it very much in that. And from where I'm seated, there's actually a 3-dimensional quality when I look across the surface that's actually kind of successful. I don't know if you see it, like it's undulating, like from my perspective. But it makes me just wonder if there's more experimentation, like changing the shaker tape for the changing the warp and the weft of the 2 materials to get around some of the looseness of the cord. If it's easier to pull the shaker tape tighter because you can staple it, and playing with that. And now that you've kind of tried it, you could even play within this stool structure with the positioning of the cross braces, just so it could open up more possibilities for bringing this into a chair form. I see the reference that you're trying to make to it's Kubo Bahai, right? The Kubo Bahai furniture
By Kubo.
here.
Yeah.
But this gesture seems too small. Like when you look at all the robustness of the furniture that you use as a source material and even the proportions of your stools, this seems so small. Like if you wanted this gesture, it needs to have proportionally the same weight as the other elements. And I would probably, if you really insisted on having that, and I don't know if you need it, but I would use the materials that you're using and not introduce a third, even though I see this is a natural material, like it's a rattan, right? So it's taken directly from that furniture. But I think an accent, like, if it was genuine and I don't know how you would resolve that, but just something to consider. Anyway.
Sure.
I'm really happy with the outcome of your exploration with the weaving. I know that was an important, for a long time now, throughout the year, in terms of something you wanted to bring to this project. And I appreciate that you decided not to just focus on perhaps one stool, and that you did make which fits for me with your project, a family of pieces, and they nest together, and it sort of comes back to that thought that you were saying about your upbringing and your family and your time in the Philippines. I would agree. I'm not convinced on the application of the rattan at this point. However, I know the intention and I know where it could go. What I think's for you is there's a wonderful opportunity to take this, as everyone has said already, to the next step. You seem to have a genuine interest, I think, in the weaving. When we talk about weaving in class, you'd be quite excited about it. So I think that weaving part of this is really exciting for you. And to now consider ways to bring it to more furniture pieces. But also remember there's an opportunity to utilize other people in the process. So perhaps if there's components of a project which you can't fulfill on your own, but the weaving is your part, the complexity of a chair form may be achieved by someone else as the next step for you, where you then bring in your weaving part and continue to further that. So I would just encourage you not to be restricted feeling now that you've got the weaving part underway, to continue to push yourself with it, because it's effective. And they feel good to sit on. And I'm glad we resolved where those pins go. I don't know what they're called. The hooks.
Yeah.
The hooks. We had some hooks moving around and now they're covered up and everything feels great. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got too much more to add really, but yeah. Yeah, I think I agree. Like it's a really great exploration of weaving, and it's great to see you incorporate those chocolate hills into the pattern here. Like it seems like an excellent opportunity to do that. I would love to see a chair version of something like this, just to see it push beyond where it is right now. And the rattan to me, I don't, it's not lending anything to this. It does feel like it's a bit of a last minute add-on. So, thinking of some way, if that is really important to incorporate that into this piece, just thinking of some other way to incorporate that it doesn't feel like a last minute kind of tack on. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, great work with the weaving. The weaving is great.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I actually find those little rattan elements to be an incredibly important detail on this piece. And I think it is an issue of scale. And you as a designer and maker tend to hedge your bets, and you're very cautious. And there's something about the instinct of putting that wrapping there that is refreshingly not like you, but not really ballsy enough yet somehow. I mean, it almost needs to be a bigger gesture. So maybe this is an opportunity for you to celebrate your instincts, but also just take a bigger risk and just do something that really feels kind of crunchy somehow. Do you know what I mean? I think it's the right thing, but it just needs to be bigger. And that detail right where the leg meets those weaving elements, it makes a lot of sense to me. So keep up the instinct and just be more aggressive, with it.
For sure.
Okay. Hi, my name's Flora. My project is called Home by Mourning. This started pretty immediately for me a year and a half ago during Capstone prep, because kind of the only thing that I felt compelled to create work on was this major thing that happened in my life, which was my dad's passing in 2020. Home by Mourning exists to represent how a craft person can honor the deceased, while also creating an environment with furniture and textiles that facilitate conversation and storytelling around grief, life, love, our family lives. So this multidisciplinary response to grief investigates the ways loss can intersect with creativity. Through my initial ideation with Kirsten, we did kind of like all these like 5 pillars. And 2 really stuck out to me that I kept in mind during the whole process while I was making the pieces. And the first one was honor. That was, I mean, I think it's important to anybody that has a loved one who's passed. I felt really compelled to make my father something deeply special. We never got to have like a last conversation, so it felt like a great opportunity to kind of do this. The word honor is really important to me. My dad dealt with a lot of shame, especially towards the end of his life. He was an addict and an alcoholic. And that really makes you isolate from your children. I think anybody would be very scared to ask for help. And yeah, I guess what I wanted to create was something that really showed that I had like a fun and nurturing and loving experience with both my parents. And I never felt any lacking. And that's what I really wanted to show with this, is something that is like fun and bold and colorful and like represents what he's given to me. The second one is connection. So how can I use these processes that he's given me in my life, but also how can I connect with other artists who create work around grief? I did a lot of like reading for this project, a lot of like reading into symbology and other crafts that have kind of stood the test of time and really speak to grieving and the mourning process like over hundreds of years, and how you can connect to those artists and create work in the same vein. Okay, so the kind of point on connection that I was making, my dad was an artist. He taught me how to sew. He was a fabric dyer. This is a picture, it's a newspaper clipping of him in high school with his buddy, also named Steve. So the clipping says Earl of March high school students in Ottawa. Steve Glavin, my dad, with the tank top, and Steve Hawley have set a national record when they created a 256 square foot batik. So I included this because it really shows his love of process. He was a very diligent maker. Something like batik takes an extremely long time to create. You're pouring wax on a fabric to create an image, so it's not easy like drawing on paper. The wax has to be at a very certain temperature so you're not burning anything, but then so it's light enough to create a line. So I really want to like honor this love of process and these like intricacies of craft. So with that, I dyed my own fabric for this collection, and I had a lot of fun doing that, and just some process photos to show that. Okay, so I'll talk about my aesthetic influences a little bit. I was also very driven by the idea of home for this. I wanted something that like spoke to where I'm from and where he's from. He's from Ontario, but he, lived in Newfoundland for 30 years, so he's also from Newfoundland. But yeah, so one thing that we have a huge influence of on the island of Newfoundland is Gothic and Gothic revival, especially this idea of what's called Carpenter Gothic, which I found through doing this project, and that is specifically Gothic influences with these like ornamental, bold shapes, but it was made by country furniture craftsmen who maybe didn't have the same resources, and it was a little bit easier to pull this kind of stuff off with a jigsaw. So yeah, they're using the shapes and the colors and the liveliness from Gothic, but turning into something that's a little bit more accessible. And then this is kind of the original influence, a Pougin chair from the mid 1800s with those cutouts and kind of that graphic fun quality. Yeah, just another couple slides showing country furniture from Newfoundland. So you can see that the play with negative space and shape is really important, a lot of like scalloped edges. And then here on the right side is just a home from Newfoundland with most of them have pine paneling for walls. Now I feel like I'm repeating Cody's presentation. But yeah, very few houses in Newfoundland were insulated. So you see a lot of these kind of like precarious little mixes of textiles throughout the home that is really to add like layers of warmth. So you see a lot of homes in Newfoundland that have like 3 rugs stacked on top of each other and these cushions on every chair. And it's because most surfaces are very cold. So I'll start with the quilt. The quilt, I was inspired to investigate storytelling through researching different quilt blocks. Every quilt block tells a very specific story. Quilts are an important historical document. It gave women a voice to create a voice to muse on like their family lives and the story behind them. So again, a lot of the blocks have very specific contexts. This is called a log cabin quilt. On the top here is some of my initial ideation. This is what a log cabin quilt kind of more traditionally looks like with the repeated blocks. I decided to kind of render this down to one overarching story because I was keeping in mind also the idea of reflection and how I didn't want it to overcome the furniture as well. I chose the log cabin. It's a traditionally Ontario quilt block. They don't know where it originated, but pretty much as long as quilts have been in Ontario, they've had the log cabin. A log cabin quilt represents the hearth right in the center. So traditionally it's the only red or orange piece that the entire quilt gets. And then the reason why it's called a log cabin is because the center, the hearth represents the home. And then you've got the sun casting a shadow on the opposite side of the property. I like the storytelling behind this. It kind of represents, you know, the natural ups and downs of any relationship. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that. So another important process in the making process is the washing. It feels really good to do after you've spent hours and hours of quilting. The washing really gives it this like pucker and this warmth that it wouldn't have straight off the machine. It is my first quilt done with wool batting. So the fabric that you see on the outside is all cotton. That's called the quilt top. The batting on the inside is 100% wool. It gives some more loft to the quilt. So just adding to that feeling of comfort, you've got a little bit more of that pucker and a little bit more of the plush. And it's also more traditional because you can technically walk up to a sheep and like rip the batting and put it in the quilt, but obviously it's not what I did, but that is the idea. So the next piece is the heirloom chest. The chest, oh gosh, where do I start with this? I wanted the chest to have a strong sense of sentiment and storytelling. Again, just to reference the research and the kind of comfort that all these symbols gave me over my 3 years of the grieving process. So I landed on a frame and panel construction with artwork painted inside the panel pieces. This way, each piece of art, by the nature of frame and panel, gets its own frame. It kind of honors the paintings and the stories within the paintings and recesses them a little bit to protect them. I was also attached to this idea of creating a window into another world. So painting images from nature that suggest kind of looking into another environment or another stage of life. When I was researching Gothic furniture, I ended up seeing this timeline of like writers who were also working in that period, and it's like extremely dramatic and sentimental and over the top, and I really liked that. And they talked a lot about interconnectedness with the natural world and the cycle of life. So most of the images here kind of refer to like blooms and seeds and the cycle of all of us. And then I have a note about pine. I really liked this quote. I think it kind of summed up everything I was trying to say by picking pine. Pine was always the wood of choice for craftspeople because it was local, free, and abundant. Pine shaped our domestic lives. Log houses, carved implements, and rustic furniture. There's a primitiveness, a raw beauty, a reassuring strength, generosity of scale, and warmth. And then these are some sketches. So this is kind of how the quilt process or the chess process went down. I started with some initial like notes on what I was trying to convey. And then every panel gets like a pencil sketch on it before it gets filled in. And then here is the kind of what it finally looks like in detail. Oh, no photo, that's fine. And then this is the stool I'm calling the weekend stool because it was the very last piece. I had a lot of fun playing with this shape over the semester. I think it speaks to this like inventiveness of country furniture and textiles that have a life with furniture and belong to the piece. And again, using those abstract shapes and cutouts. So then lastly, I wrote on a micro scale, the details of Home by Mourning represent stories of mine and my father's relationship. But I also wanted any user or viewer to be able to identify and relate to ideas of lamentation, so creating work for another person, and also joy in the face of the grieving process. And that's it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, they all kind of have their own thing going on, and I'll turn it around after so that you can see the ones in the back. Birds are usually portrayed as like a messenger of messages from one kind of stage of life to another. So I knew I wanted to include birds, and then we've got the night sky and the morning sun, just for that contrast of different stages of life. On your guys are left, this piece is actually referencing a little piece from not that far left, but that's okay. So some of the images are symbols that I actually found in a Walter Peddle book. So that little heart in the front, Walter Peddle is a kind of the only person who ever photographed furniture in Newfoundland. And that was a kind of little detail from there. The sides, both of the sides are smoke and flame. That represents kind of the like eternal lasting relationships that you have with someone. And I also made that specifically for kind of like the eternal joy of learning. My dad was, extremely skilled in so many capacities and loved to continue learning. And he was literally doing new stuff like up until the day he passed, which I thought was amazing. The back panel represents seeds and what's kind of bestowed upon you, what grows from that. Yeah.
I just want to say that it's such a joy like watching you make things. I think, well, first of all, I know that these objects came from one story and one event in your life, but please always use narrative and story of the piece you make, because it's just there's so much behind these objects, and I think you've just done such a beautiful job conveying this
Thank you.
story. And the other thing is that I've learned, the other thing that I've learned, just through the 4 weeks of sharing studio space with you is, to just your like trusting the Flora process. It's always fun when you, not funny, but it's always the initial ideas of this colorful quilt and this chest and like paintings on it, and then you're going to do this school. You know, I know you're such a more person, and it's always fun to see these things like come together in the end in a way, you know. I think everybody is a little surprised with the paintings. I mean, obviously you're a very talented artist, but nobody ever really seen these paintings before. You that you really painted, so yeah, I commend the mixed media and everything you put into this.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a blast watching you. Very good. Yeah, Flora, what a great presentation.
Thank you.
Like, you really clearly, talk about the process, and how these things come about. So it's a great way to learn. Yeah, I mean, created some lovely pieces here, that have clear connections, and I know that it's not, you know, it's not your intention for those connections to be made just by the viewer, but it's been a real privilege to kind of for you to share that process with us. Yeah, the honor, the connection, those are all like they're all coming through for me. So I think this project is a real step in my eyes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then, you know, it was just, I mean, I've been kind of following along, just on the periphery the whole way, but
Emergency medical assistant on the cabinet.
But yeah,
Yeah. You can sit on both of them.
It's been really like the presentation really illuminated some of the things that that I didn't really know about, with this really nice.
That's good. Thank you.
That's Dave.
No, there's no stay. Yeah.
No stay.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Honestly, it was just something that I was so like involved in that I didn't think about it until I put the top on. Yeah. I would like to put one on there. Yeah.
Is there a finish one?
Yes. Yeah. It's Osmo hard wax. The hardness will hopefully help protect the paintings. The piece only has one coat, and then the panel pieces on the inside of 3 coats. So it's just like very scratch resistant. I think I would like to put more coats on the body of the piece as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think will be interesting with those time pieces in particular is
Mhm.
to see how they get me out.
Yeah.
With, you know, after the narrative of the piece, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't actually stay in kind of moving.
Oh, right. Okay.
I'm really delighted by the work you today is just rising up from, because I think it nails the aspect of the kind of like the vernacular way that is idiosyncratic and kind of humble in ways that, you know, so the overarching theme of the topic is it's a pretty massive thing to cover. And, I was really impressed by the way you made a connection not only to this this tragedy in your life is not just about your father dying, but also your attempt to recreate a relationship with him through these objects. And I would really encourage you to take this presentation and find appropriate venues where you can present it publicly in symposia or conferences, because it can't just be in this small room. Very impressive. Your comment about precarious pieces of textile is really intriguing to me, because it really sort of suggests this kind of throwaway aspect that also very important, and that's what you've done with this little piece, with this little great thing to tides and underneath that gives a certain level of comfort, but not too much. And be too comfortable. No. So it shows a deep understanding of the kind of cultural significance of the place that you come from and the problems that it provides to everybody that has to, live in a, in a romantic idea, a harsh environment, etc., all that stuff about, the history of nuclear that is part folklore and part real life. So, I know that I had a really big defeat. So, so in that kind of thing, yeah, it was back in the day for sure. So there's a through line from that really big critique to what you have created on the panels of the sketch that is really interesting. And I know it's not lost on you, but I just want to make that connection. I was really glad at Kirsten Bergen you described the imagery and the symbology of these panels, because I think that's something that people want to understand, and rather than just looking at like these intriguing and slightly spooky chiaroscuro panels, there's actual meaning. So ensure that if you hone this proposal or presentation for future use, that is central to it. Absolutely. You shouldn't have to get drawn by your audience to own what that means. I think the title is obviously very prominent and beautiful, and the concept of your way of describing honor as an opportunity to kind of create a relationship that didn't necessarily exist, but should have. I think we all have that.
There's so many, honestly, barriers that you face, in person. It's hard to say everything you want to say sometimes.
We greatly use time, and I respect the fact that right now they're bright shining words haven't lived, but they will, and do, and establish a patina and age, and in a couple of years of sun exposure, and someone they're going to just get better and better. When someone lifts off that precarious piece of textile, you'll see the difference, and you'll know that that was made for that piece, so they can continue to. So and great modest craftsmanship appropriate for what it is intended. I'm sure Ian has a saying for that.
I'm very happy, and I would never even thought to do this, not being a textile artist, but that you lost the quilt. Actually, I see how much harder it is, Because it looked on me and perfect, it didn't have the same color, yeah, that, I think we were trying to get across in the pieces, so. So it's a little thing, but it was important. Yeah. And so I just want to recognize that we took the time to do that. I actually think the quilt is very successful. I didn't see it, most of the time. I appreciated all your words and thought to have chosen the law pattern and how you're blowing up the image. I was never quite convinced by the color choices and things, and I don't know, I just didn't see it, but I really see the dialogue between the quilt, the two sides and blowing up like that. It really speaks to all the things that we're talking about very successfully, so well done. And like Peter, I'm really glad that you pushed forward. Like, I was hoping to see it in your personal stuff in the little school because it really was making and it really makes sense because it embodies so many of the things that we're talking about. And the Cody's presentation last week, and I think it's very large and sarcastic rate understanding. That whole idea of enough is enough, or those kind of things. And then with the chest, and the reason I asked you to talk about the images, because again, in the beginning I wasn't so sure about the art because I can't help but to associate art with like a fallen made and very much Renaissance. Referring to Gothic revival, to be clear, Gothic revival, that's what you're referring to. Yes, Gothic. But the way you chose to extend the imagery through those panels really speaks to the symbolism that we spoke about in finding the window, and it's the idea of communion with the deceased. So I think that comes across really nice. That's very good. And I think that's a lot because these are things that are well outside from our personal, taste or aesthetic, right? But I can really appreciate them and thought. Well, the very thoughtful thing to all of these things. You're writing on this project has been very strong. The research that was put into this, and it's very nice to see. I'm sure that it's come across in the pieces, like, you can think about the last minute, like the little school, and so it is coming across. So,
most of it been said. The thing I would say is I'm glad that you approach all four sides of the bank account.
Yeah.
And the discussion and knowing that it may just go up against the wall, but given the significance of what we're discussing, we have introduced those windows around the whole block was an important part. And then from a professional standpoint, we will come moving forward. I know the school called the weekend school because it was made this past weekend.
Yeah.
So I'm going to encourage you to try your best to not have that become part of how you live.
Yeah,
in the future.
I don't want to. I definitely started with these two pieces because I knew they were the most labor intensive. And I don't like the three objects were always a plan, and I don't know if we were able to pull off the other two like last. So this naturally came last. But
And you overcome some obstacles to get, and sort of the semester, which I got a few weeks. But this is the point is that it can become part of the working process in time, especially after you've used it for 4 years, you have a way of working, and it's the back part of it. It will make your working life a lot more fulfilling and enjoyable and not that's potentially stressful.
to get things done on time.
To get things done a little bit more, that kind of thing, but I understand that it's good reasons it happens. I come from a household where there's lots of books, in Broken. So I do have very bit of appreciation for what you achieved with the book. You know that there's not just after did you tell us in the presentation that there was handwriting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fact that you hand out your fabrics, I know the piecework that goes into it, I haven't looked at the actual quilting and then the rest of the machine. It's not too big. But everything works together, in terms of the materials that go in, the lightness of the pine contrasting against, the blue color of the quilt. And it's again, it's nice to see. It's another project in which I didn't see the blanket off completely until today. So it's nice to see.
Yeah, I mean,
See it all together now today.
yeah.
And
I
see
was
them
thinking
all
of like for cool.
So,
Yeah.
anybody else? Andrea? Yeah, I just wanted to commend you on the construction of the box. Because I think it's so well done, and I think it's a very, there's a lot of technical parts about it, creating those curves on the right table and stuff. And how everything interlocks. Yeah, it's really nice. And I can really see like the amount of detail and thinking that went into it to make it a piece that's gonna last. And yeah, putting together despite the good luck. I really fun. And I also really love the informality that you kind of, designed into the school. I think it was, yeah, I love how that has in the bond.
Thanks, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say. But I taught their second year school before I met you. And so I consider myself to be the person who I'm expecting in here. And I don't. Sorry. The work that you make is unlike anyone else's. You have like an originality and creativity, that I don't see in how other like modern people or like you are able to see things from the past and do that in ways that I don't see anyone else. And the fact that I like to really completely. Thank you. That is something that I was definitely trying to accomplish, and like pieces being for people I love.
Well, we made it. I mean, Dan always goes first. We can't change that. The rules. Yeah, so before I came to Sheridan, I was working at a job and it was nice, but kind of felt like my mind was rotting away. It wasn't very challenging to me, but it allowed me to accomplish certain life goals, such as buying a home for myself, or rather a very small studio apartment. So once that was covered and I took on a mortgage, I decided to quit and come to Sheridan in hopes that although I will probably have to work my whole life to pay off hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, maybe I can do it doing something that I kind of enjoy and challenges me and, checks those boxes. So yeah, I don't think I've ever really shared this before, but that's a lot of the reason that I'm constantly thinking about homes, and maybe a big part of it that led me down this capstone path. I grew up in an environment where expressing yourself didn't really yield positive results a lot of the time. So, could feel unsafe, and maintaining this home that I bought, which meant that I had a safe space to thrive in, is really important to me. That breath thing. So supporting this as a full-time student for 4 years was incredibly difficult. Caused me a lot of anxiety, mostly based on the determination that I needed to be successful as soon as possible post-graduation, because I have a mortgage that actually renews in 1 month and I need a good job to keep that going. So my time at schools and the pressures, the creativity, the search for some form of identity brought up many challenges and difficult feelings connected to this. Rewiring your brain to feel that expressing yourself is a safe and positive experience can be a very painful process. So I just wanted to thank everyone for your friendship and your support and knowledge and kindness over the years. I'm so happy to have gone through this program with such an amazing group of people, and having this community means so much to me. I'm so excited to see where everyone's going to go from here. Palette cleanser. First year cutting board, Andrew Reeser's class. It is what it is. Went through the dishwasher a few times, and I think ended up going into the fire pit. But it worked pretty well for that. But yeah, we've come a long way, so just wanted to throw that in. So I'm just gonna start with my influences, and I think there was really 3 key main ones. There's the Cato system by Paul Cadovius, and this was an image I've been referencing since 3rd year capstone prep. I really loved how the only attachment was slats on the wall, and all the cabinets and shelves were supported with floating hardware. The system could be arranged to personal preference with many types of cabinetry components. Next, there's Zoe Moet's iZone cabinet. This really convinced me that staining wood could look really good. I hadn't really seen any examples of it before. There's not much out there, and maybe not a lot that I was attracted to. And then the color pop of red was a really beautiful moment of interaction, which makes someone excited about opening the cabinet. And this is really something that I hope to achieve in my design, those small moments. Next, after I kind of got into color, I looked to Joseph Albers and his book, Interaction of Color. So after being convinced to dive into that, I took out his book, Interaction of Color, from the library and did a lot of the exercises from it, because it's basically a compilation of his exercises to students, and then student work. A lot of it is, cutouts on paper. One example is, how do you make one color appear as 2, or find the middle tone of a color? So I kind of looked a lot into this. So here's an example where I have the same color in 2 different ones. You can hold them apart. It's all about how it perceives color in different ways. So then I was putting together our process document, and I looked back on the brief, and I was actually really surprised, because I was going to go in and edit the page, rewrite history a little bit. And I read it again, and it kind of hit all of the marks. So I'm just going to reread my brief from back in the fall, and this is the unedited version. My goal is to design a contemporary cabinetry solution for entryway areas. The object will have a sense of customization for the user while not being overwhelming to select options and easy to install. I'm working to create simple moments within each object that the user can find joy in. The system could be suited for batch production and should show the opportunity that it can be expanded on as a product line. I think I did a pretty good job. I don't want to spend too much time on target market, but I have the StatsCan research to back it up, and a lot of qualitative research, being all of my friends' apartments in Toronto, that there is in fact a very large and rapidly growing market for this type of product. Then there's just 2 of my good friends hanging out on a beach, which is actually a pile of rubble from its Toronto demolition, and they just dump it into the water to make I don't know, areas to hang out and cut yourself on rebar. And then in the background, there's like rapidly growing condos. So, you know, very, I don't know, kind of place to hang out. Yeah, so I'm kind of after I went like our fall for winter critique and into the design development. So at this stage in January, I hadn't come up with a system. Everything was kind of screwed together in the walls or half lap joints. But I don't know, one day, night, thinking about this thing constantly, this one idea popped into my head. And I went into school, made some, you know, sketch models of it, tried to mock it up and see if this concept could work. And I really felt that this was something I could develop further. We bought some junk, you want to pass it around, pick a piece, all part of the design prototype, mostly for what the mounting system is supported on. So after I established this initial prototype, I moved on to this steel prototype, which is really like my proof of concept. So I had intended for these components to be made out of steel, but I had to figure out, one, if I would have the resources and the skills to fabricate it. Like, can it be done? Can it be welded? Does it make sense for a fabricator to do? Like, there's a lot of changes and considerations. I don't have a lot of experience with metal and welding. So like the steel plates, someone else welded them, but I was with them all day and I could see, you know, what's easy, what's hard, what makes sense, what I brought in these, which was a really good way to communicate the design on top of having drawings and stuff, but just showing them the overall picture. I always think that's nicer for anyone to be involved in something, especially if you're like someone on a production floor, just like making one-offs and not seeing the whole picture. And, you know, they're doing me a favor. So I wanted, I don't know, maybe if they get some joy out of it, that's nice too. And then secondly, is this thing going to do what I want it to do? So is it going to place on and off vertical posts? And will it support the weight of a person? So that was a big stress test, but it worked. So here they're all in this little box too, but these are the progression of the mounting brackets, which you can see there's just that little yellow circle on my final pieces poking through. There's, you know, MDF and poplar, and then I have the steel original one I made with a welder, a 3D printed model of what my intention for the final design is, and then the final design, which is steel and you know, welded, polished, powder coated. Just gonna show you 2 videos of how it all kind of goes together. Yeah. So that's how you get the posts on the wall mounted bracket, and these brackets are just attached with 2 screws into the wall. So it's very minimal installation with, like, you know, tools and things like that. And then the next one. This is how all the profile bracket, shelf, cabinets, all of that connects. It's all the same system. And that's it. Not my whole presentation. So yeah, the installation process, you just need 12 screws. I made a mounting jig based off my 3D drawings that just like cut out very precisely where the mount should go, because I have very small tolerances between everything. So just measuring it by hand, it just wouldn't work. So yeah, that's how I did that. There's places for the wall mounts and somewhere where you can level it. And then finally, I have all my custom components. I don't think like everything I design myself, and if not, I'm really, really good at scouring the McMaster car website and putting a bunch of things together to make something that turns into some different kind of hinge. So I was really happy with all of it, how it turned out. early on, I realized I needed to design my own cabinet hinges. I wanted a tip out door to maximize space and storage. And there's really nothing on the market that would work for it. It was very small, minimal selection. And I was experimenting a lot with 3D printing at the time. So I designed and 3D printed them myself. And then here's some pictures of all the metal components after they were cut with a water jet, and the wall mount post after the welding stage. And then here are all the parts to after powder coating. And this is me assembling it. And that's it. Go for it. Huh?
I don't know who that is, but
Well, it kind of is the same thing that's happening there. So, okay, stop share. Oh, we're in the metaverse now.
Is the hardware for sale?
Yeah, for a price. Yeah.
I remember this piece you mentioned, and I think we accomplished the few the time to do, and the hardest one is that mountain. And I think you nailed it. It was like a regular homeowner with that up, which is hard. Yeah. You know, we take our skills for granted sometimes, and forget how difficult some of these things are going to be on a daily basis for the average person. And that looks very good. That looks like it requires master.
Yeah.
So that's a big achievement right there. And whenever you try to tackle your own hardware, that can really spiral into a wormhole of other problems. And you know I know. But I think this is a really good solution. Did you end up going with the video?
I did.
Yeah.
Two to three coats, like the linear took it darker in there.
Is that an app or
Right. Right, you read it.
Yeah.
Read out that.
Nice.
Right out to the way I'm covering everything.
Yeah, it takes a while.
Yeah, and I wanted, because of the green pattern.
Yeah. The walnut actually shakes the
Yeah.
Yeah, nice execution. I like the jingles.
Thank you.
And the solos, like,
Yeah.
really, that's a product in itself. Those are, I've looked for those myself before, not really come up with anything that isn't like a very decorative glass, like rebound.
That's it. Yeah. Yes. Oh,
Good.
all right.
Patty, I wanted to take the shelf apart and put it back together because I know at the start of this, everybody had their points of resistance to feedback that Andrea and I was giving, and it would be really pushy to make a system that flexible. And because you really wanted to make a product, that was a very straightforward goal from the start, and you had a lot of clarity around that. And you've been very business about it, which I appreciate, especially as an investment in myself. And we were very successful in that regard. Like a successful department put it back together. And I think that's really important in the system. And one thing, just on the side, I really encourage you, noticing the photographs, photograph it in this area alone. But if you have the time and energy to take any more photographs, I think to show it in different arrangements, it really emphasizes that quality, that it is a system and it's flexible. Even if this is a favorite, you know, because that is part of success. It's not easy to make a system. It's not easy to create your own hardware. So I think it's been very successful in that regard. That we took the time to think through those pieces, you know, and we should be really proud of that. There's a lot of elements that we could just commenting on the changes, but that is a product in itself, you know, and that it demonstrates a lot of skill, right? Because it's not just the aesthetic design, but you've done all the sort of engineering technical thought. You've really seen it through. You know, so it shows. It looks like a legitimate, real product that you could market it or potentially license to somebody, you know, yeah, under your treatment. Paul? I just switch my side.
If you speak, that you don't need a microphone. Okay. Wow. I was so skeptical about this project. You have, yeah, it is unfair to me to say that you've surprised me. Meaning that, I know what your capabilities are, but I still didn't trust that there was room in a market or a thoroughness of reinventing details that would make this a viable thing. And for all of the reasons that Lucas has said already, and you can hear him slattering about the idea of using your hardware in his next project, probably. But I would agree that there's a density to the exploration and the prototyping of individual parts that allowed you to assemble all those things into a system that actually will be something that, as Tiffany said, someone with slightly longer fingernails than mine can actually take apart and put that together with ease. And I think that is a rare kind of circumstance, because I could not count in 30 years the number of times I've seen people attempt a system that falls apart immediately upon anybody else other than the maker trying to assemble it, install it, disassemble it, and move it around. So I agree with Kristen. Seeing all of the other potential configurations would be really helpful. I would love to see it as a stop motion of you or maybe a couple of people putting it together and taking it apart. Because the animation is like whether it was done in Fusion or SolidWorks, the animation is a generic thing that looks like something that hardware company is trying to sell you. And it explains it to us well enough here. But to have images of the whole thing kind of together being pulled apart would be super helpful. Those of you that haven't opened the cabinet may not have seen that, you know, the 3D printing on one side of the hinge assembly is sort of trademarked with your Bela system thing. That, I think it's great because it really shows that you've used the potential of your time here with the facilities that you have to the maximum. And I think it's great, the combination of what you found online, what you needed to fabricate, what you needed to have fabricated. It's a full assembly of things. We talked about having comprehensive drawings and presentation that will allow you to communicate with suppliers. Absolutely, that's a tremendous learning process that allows you to get where you got with the support of other people who have absolutely greater knowledge than you, and yet the only way to bridge that is through your communication. You probably allow them to understand you better and trust you more, not just some flaky gal with another idea that was totally unfeasible, right? It's actually something that could work. So that helped you leverage the skills that they have. So I think that's great. I'm also thinking that maybe the time you spent at STEP last summer would have been instrumental in helping you understand what you need for this, but you need to understand systems and hardware. So that's certainly something we're mentioning. So yeah, I want to spend more time with this thing to be able to understand how I can use it better. But I think it's also great that you looked at Joseph Albers and the relationship with color and so on. You got a long way to go to match Joseph Albers' investigations in that way. Right now, it was, you know, fun and kind of subtle, but maybe it could be even more subtle. But you're working with specific colors and powder coating and assuming that gets very expensive, especially in Philippines. So did you actually get these pieces of powder coating?
Yeah, they're powder coated, like but again,
Yeah.
been very helpful to the project. Like all the welding powder coating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned a lot there and as much as school has like a great facility, I think that one so big to the next level and lucky to have that.
Yeah, that I agree. I think before you rush to powder coat things, you know, these are the colors you might have had access to. You know, Hannah Spraker, you go to Canadian Tire, you'll see a wall of every single shade, every single color, thousands of them, and it will look exactly the same in a presentation like this, but it will be probably more Joseph Albers than you get a code in mind. Not to say that down the road, when you get something that's manufactured on a scale, you can get exactly the Joseph Albers color you want, but it would be a custom mixing job, which is really expensive.
Yeah, I think the benefit I got from looking into Joseph Albers is being able to like have an underground color. I think that way, but we can talk about it. And then also like all of the graphic quality of the reading work. Just like it's work better. It's not just intro page collage. And a big influence just on the large scale walking. So I didn't have certain colors to pick from out of, you know, the paint line, but I picked the ones that I thought would go well, controlled, and it was for me too, but I don't get that. You know, I wasn't go because I know later on say someone wants to put this into production, they can change all those words, whatever forming color they want and diet, you know, always with their you know what we all do, it's easier, but so the first time I saw it all together was when we were the studio, probably separate components, so that was really exciting for me. Yeah, you know, like what like all composition. I mean, we had a different but yeah, some of them all about it.
Yeah, when I speak about the problem, it's not so much that I don't think these are good, fresh, nice combinations, because there's another level of subtlety that we have just not explored that same way as just about it. And someone like Zoe Moda really does explore and live in that space. So you're stuck with totally into it, and I think that's great.
Madison control this nice secret and people with it's really inspiring and beautiful and it's almost like I really love this piece. I'd love to have it. So maybe we can talk a little bit. I just wanted to take this chance to like thank all of the 40th year. Like we worked collectively since so inspiring and it's your presence and knowledge and help in the studio next year because you've all helped in some capacity. So I just wanted to say thank you and you guys deserve a big hand and everything that you ever want. So yeah, we'll I did one more question, and if you're open to sharing, I'd love to know, using the kind of name.
Oh, yeah, there's a story behind that. In the fall, I went and I, when I became the beauty colors, modern, postmodern, kind of colors possible. And when I saw David Bowie documentary that came out around that time, and he covered that song, I was a really personal fan, and David Bowie was also a big fan of Memphis, and so it's not design, but the band had a song called Down. Yeah, they play that song while you're looking at it. Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
That's Christina like a Bela.
Any more comments?
I'm glad you stuck with this. And I'm glad that you, have developed putting in a system that I know another ways and do stuff throughout, the year, but it seems next to it, the scale of it, works, which is important, because it feels right when you're interacting with it. And we're all working on the books. I think it's important to know, just knowing what you have to do, how many parts and how many drawings you have to do in order to actually ever having put something together, which was difficult to do. I think for everyone, it's important to see that Maddie's relationship with the people she worked with last summer was a positive experience for both herself and Getson, and for the people she worked for. And when you transition out of school and you've been working with all of this, Maddie now has a resource who she can ask for help with stuff, even though I think it's still working there. So to my point, what I'm trying to get to is it's really important to try and have these try and make sure you have good interactions with people, your classmates, if it's your suppliers, whoever it is, because it does help you when it comes to crunch time, because if it wasn't for staff helping out with a lot of these, not ideas, but realizing some of these things, it would have been probably contradictory. Likely, and it would have been unfortunate because you wouldn't be here to do this and show your idea. So kudos to you for having done it well with the job you have there. And thanks to them for watching, for helping you with the parts, because it's important. And this is the program for it, so which is great. And I'm really happy to see you happy too, because I know this has been a challenging year for your times. And see you come out of this feeling supported and being a creative person. It is what you are, it's a great thing. So keep that spirit going. Yeah.
My comment was yours, for the second misunderstanding and anybody who is watching this and watching this later. What is great about Maddie's project and all the projects today, and I think it's really important for coming into Capstone year, is to think about how you want to leverage this year to what you want to do career-wise. And Maddie, you were very clear about that, as kind of alluded to that before, but you were very clear about having your objectives, your beliefs that you created this year along with your professional goals. And there's different approaches, obviously you can see with Capstone, it really is your choice and pursue it what you want to do. Andrea and I and Brother will be teaching us, will push you guys to try to draw the best bouquet of you. And it'll be different for each student. So Maddie is really researching, really pushing to the system, right? For other students, it goes, really understanding the work of other designers to back up their ideas, etc. So anyway, just something for prospective capstone students out there to think about how to make your capstone year align with where you imagine yourself out of school. So, anyway, congratulations to you and everything today. Do we have any more comments? We are ready to go over time here. Well, I can wrap her up. Thank you to, again, our guests, Lee and Peter, and Selena, and coming. It's always nice when students obviously get input that's not things that energy and mind between maybe repetitively broken records like saying it all. You guys should be really proud of your work. I hope you're a little better rested than often people are coming to script if we have a change of a script day and then some one or another. But you should be proud of yourselves. I'm sure Andrea would agree that we push you hard and we feel very invested and we worry, are you guys going to make it? And it's so rewarding this day. I always really like to for the person. And I know it's really important for you guys to be very proud. Anything to add anything? Okay. Don't forget your deadlines tomorrow for the exhibitions, because those are other really nice milestones where you will be well rested and you get to share them with the people that are important in their lives, friends and family. And it's really nice to see the work. You know, and then that's not cluttered with chairs and snacks and tables. You know, it really elevates the work. Yeah. Anyone else have anything to say? Okay. Yeah, we should see it.
Okay. It's a pretty general comment, but the capstone year is a really challenging one for students, obviously, and being prepared to go into something like this with the end goal sometimes can seem almost insurmountable. I think we've all done a tremendously inspiring job in carrying on your desires from the time I first met you 4 years ago. And so for me, it's very interesting parachuting back into your place to see where you're at. I'm sure with the skills the same, it's really a tremendous development in everyone's project from the end of last semester. And having taught this course with Kirsten for a few years, I know how challenging it can also be from a faculty perspective, because as a faculty member, you are profoundly invested in the work of each individual student. And although you may not feel it at the time, the number of conversations that occur trying to solve problems, give assistance, give emotional and technical support that happen well beyond class times, well beyond the end of term. That's something that's a legacy that your faculty always feel for you. And which is why I was so excited that Andrea could take on this class at the start of last semester. And why it's so amazing that he's able to be next year now. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited on that one. Now, Aaron Davis spoke to Anyway, I did want to give a tremendous amount of respect to Andrew and Kirsten for managing this very complicated project. You each have one project. They have 8, right? If you think about it. And Christina has 50. So again, the challenges presented by managing these projects are pretty huge. So, and thanks for joining us. Well done. Nice job.